You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there are latest things that makes official. Welcome to the big show, as always. For 16 years and 2,500 episodes, we begin the Chris Voss Show, and we're just going to keep doubling and tripling and quadrupling that, and I'm getting tired just talking about it. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, linkedin.com/Chris Voss, facebook.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss 1 on the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet.
Opinions expressed by guests on the podcast are solely their own and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the host or the Chris Voss Show. Some guests of the show may be advertising on the podcast, but it is not an endorsement or review of any kind.
Today, amazing young lady, we're going to be talking about her work and some of the things she's doing to help pets, help pet owners, help veterans, and different things like that. She is a licensed veterinarian in the state of Georgia and has over 30 years of experience. She operated and owned an American Animal Hospital Association certified hospital for 30 years. She brought it from literally no value to selling it for over $10 million. She served on the medical advisory board of a large veterinary corporation, and now she has an online pet owner information business. They inform, educate, and empower pet owners to take optimal care of their pets and how to have better relationships with their veterinarians. Her long-term goal is to have a positive influence on the veterinary profession and raising public interest in the benefits of a human-animal bond. Her backstory is one of challenges that she overcame to live a very happy and successful life that she's happy to share. She'd love for others to learn what she's experienced and realizes that the right mindset, you can overcome adversity. Welcome to the show, Pam. How are you?
I'm doing great, Chris. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me on this show, this podcast. I've listened to several episodes, and I'm just frankly enamored to be here. So thank you.
Thank you. We're enamored to have you because we love animals, we love dogs, and we love healthy animals. I've had about 4 so far, and 3 of them are sitting across from me in a box of ashes. So we love them to be healthy. So give us your .coms. Where do you want people to find you on the interwebs?
The primary is petlovers-united.com. We are on Facebook as well. I started out as veterinarymastermind.com. You can also find me under my name, Dr. Pam Johnson. It's such an unusual name. You shouldn't have any difficulties finding me on Facebook. But I think that it's important for me to mention that when I sold my hospital back in 2020, I felt like I had sort of reached this pinnacle or this place, and something was telling me to do more, that I needed to do more. And I kept getting phone calls from people that maybe didn't quite understand what their veterinarian had shared with them, the options that they had. You know, I was raised on a farm, grew up in nature and around animals. And I started out in my first degree was in mass communications, and then I ended up following my true passion, which is veterinary medicine. And over the years, you shift from just being a technical person into being a leader of people, to being a mentor. And then over time, as I mentioned, it got to the point where I felt like we needed to have a bigger ripple. We needed to have a broader reach. And so what I'm trying to do, in short, is bridge the gap between the veterinarian and the pet owner, and help both at the same time. It's what do I wish, you mentioned that you had pets. It's what do I wish you knew, Chris, before you ever came into my office, and how much better that collaboration might be, how much better the compliance might be, and how much more confidence and empathy we can have for our pet owners, and for the pet owners in turn for the veterinarian as well. And so that's sort of how it came to be. I started a membership program And we go from A to Z to whether, should you have a pet, to what kind of pet is best for your lifestyle. So often people see a pet like a dog or a cat and they go, oh man, that looks cool. I'll go get a Belgian Malinois. And if you live in a Manhattan apartment, maybe that's not the best match for you.
Or a husky.
or a husky. Don't get me started on that one.
Yeah.
But I think that's how we end up with so many unwanted pets in this world. But I think that full circle, I'm trying to find a way to give back, not just to my community, because it's important. It's also important for you to understand and the listeners to understand that the burnout for veterinary medicine is anywhere from 3 to 5 years. They spend $150,000 to $250,000 on their education, spend 10, 12, 14 years in school, and then leave it because of burnout.
Wow.
It's highest for suicide rate.
Yeah.
As well as any
tragic,
profession. And so what we're trying to do is figure out a way to help both the pet owner as well as the veterinarian team. And we also, I think I mentioned to you before we started that we have 3 nonprofits that we're trying to raise money for. One of those is Paisley Paws. And one of the major pillars is helping to reduce economic euthanasia. So in other words, if someone brings in a pet that could otherwise be saved, let's say it swallowed something and needed surgery, and the owners couldn't afford it, Paisley Paws basically goes to try to raise money for those individuals to help prevent and minimize the economic euthanasias, because that has a pretty broad ripple, as you can imagine. It's bad for the pet, bad for the owners, and it's really bad for the veterinary team as well. The second is the Marine Corps Scholarship Foundation, raising money for children of Marines, particularly those injured or killed in the line of duty. And the last is basically one that was started by a friend of mine who's an educator. Her name is Kelly Green. She started something called the Kipper Foundation, and it raises money for the underserved in the educational world, children, teachers, even getting them supplies, scholarships, things like that. And so what we're trying to do as a result of this organization is educate pet owners from A to Z, all the way to recognizing pain, understanding quality of life, even to bereavement. And so with that, we're trying to make sure that we, again, don't go in the path of what I dare say our human cohorts are doing, which is becoming more of a transactional relationship as opposed to one of a collaborative, empathic, compassionate relationship, if that makes sense to you.
Yeah. I mean, we need more of this. I've talked about this a lot on the show over the years with people like yourself and how I learned to advocate with veterinarians for my dogs. I've got a lot of stories about, some vets, and, everyone's busy, I guess, or whatever, but some vets who wanted to put my dogs down, and they would have, and because of whatever, their bias, I suppose, maybe prejudice, my dogs lived for years after that, because I just shopped around to 3 different doctors, got 3 different opinions. And the one doctor who was the one who going, no, you don't need to put them down. The other 2 were going, you need to put them down. Ended up living for years. I think 5 years at one point. And so we've talked about this a lot on the show. It's really important to advocate. And I like how, I guess some of this you mentioned at the beginning of the show, you set this up to educate cat and dog owners, animal owners, so that when they come to you as a vet, they have a good working knowledge that they can maybe help advocate for the pet. Is that a good analogy?
It is. Not all anesthetic protocols are the same. Not all surgeries are the same. And not all breeds, ages, all of those things are not the same. And so I think that very often to your point, we don't advocate well for our pets, and the pet owners as veterinarians. And so that's one of the things. And sometimes it's maybe a lack of experience as a veterinarian, not necessarily, apathy. But I think that educationally, when we graduate from veterinary school, we don't necessarily understand the nuances of emotional intelligence and how to discuss options without judgment. And, it's a highly emotionally charged environment. And not a lot of people are, or not all people, I should say, are ready to deal with that. In one room, you're having to make, a very difficult decision with a client that you've known for 10 or 12 years. And in the next room, you're having to talk with a new puppy or kitten owner. And that shift is not always easy to make. And that comes with time, with experience and that kind of thing. But you raise a good point. I just had a conversation the other day with someone states away that they were basically told to just take their dog home and pick a day. Yeah. And I said, I'm not sure whether that's the right answer or not, but I think I would seek out other opinions. And we worked together to find the right veterinarian for her. The dog ended up having surgery. It had something called partial laryngeal paralysis, which makes it difficult for them to breathe when they get older. And that dog is doing really, really well. So I just, it's those types of things that just compel me to keep moving forward and to keep doing the things that we're doing and to keep growing. I don't want this to just be U.S. based. I want it to be international. I'm excited about the opportunities to both educate pet owners as well as veterinarians and veterinary teams. So that's where we're headed. Hopefully we're headed in the right direction.
Yeah, I've got a lot of stories. The one that sticks out to me and stuck out to me a lot was there was a time where one of my dogs had gotten anal sac cancer. And that I went in, the doctor, stuck his finger in there, felt around. He goes, it's probably full of cancer in there. And, take her home for 3 days and we'll call the ball. That was it. And she was like 14 or something at this point. They're like, look, your dog's had a great run. I always hate it when they say that. Usually the problem that I do have with doctors consistently is the older doctors. They're very stuck in the mud about their rudimentary way they've been operating for a lot of years. Sometimes they're on autopilot. I usually run into the worst bed manners from them and everyone else. The people that I find are the most innovative are actually the young people. Isn't that interesting? So I went home just crushed because we went from just immortality to your dog's dead in 3 days. And out of that, I sat down and I said, if she's got a death sentence, she's going to die. Is there anything I can do? And so I went on the internet, which sounds like a dumb thing to do because, you've seen the internet. And I found raw feeding and raw meat and taking sugar out of her diet and raising high fats and stuff like this. And I found different places that have been utilizing it for their things. And I was like, and I talked to the doctor. He goes, you're going to blow out her kidneys and liver. She's already compromised. She's got, her blood is filled with calcium to try and destroy things. I learned a lot about what cancer does and how it kills. And so I canceled taking her in to do, and I go, we're going to try this for a week. Like, what the fuck? If you got a death sentence, what do you have to lose, right? Put her on a raw diet, cut out all the sugar treats, and she had stopped eating, by the way. That was kind of one of the signs. And then, of course, you could see this fucking growing on the back. And she had stopped eating and she was drinking like a fish to offset the calcium in her bloodstream. And so I put her on the raw diet, started feeding her raw hamburger meat, the big nasty roll shit you get, and cut out all the sugar and fat. She lived for 1 year and 3/4 and stunned every veterinarian that saw her. And I've got a million cases like that I helped with dogs that were being put down, and we brought them back with a raw diet. And in the end, when I went in, she started collapsing. And I'm like, okay, after I think it was 1.5 years or so, she started collapsing and her legs were giving out in the back. And I'm like, okay, the cancer's finally hit the legs. I scheduled to put her down. She was really suffering trying to walk around, and of course the golf ball size thing was growing every day. And so I went into the doctor, I paid the money, I signed the forms, and, I was like, okay, she's suffered enough. We've gotten 1.5 years of this. And the doctor looked at her and he goes, I know that you are at this moment that you want to end this for her, but we'd like to look at her if you don't mind. And I'm like, please do. Yeah, please do. And so they took her in the back and they came back and they go, she has severe arthritis. It's not the cancer that's making her so she can't walk. She has severe arthritis. And we think we can bring her back from the arthritis and, make it so she can walk around again. And, she was still eating and running and coming to me once we put her on the raw diet and very active. And, but he said these haunting words to me. Sorry for the long lead up to this, but he said these haunting words to me. He goes, we think that she can have an extended life, but I realize that this may be too much for you to handle. So if you need to call it, we're not going to judge you on it, and we'll do it today. And I sat there looking at him going, there are people in the world that it's just too hard for them. And I get it, man. It's too hard. You're raising kids, you're chasing families, you're trying to do a job. There's some people that they call that ball because it's just too hard for them. And I get it. But I was like, no, let's try this. And she lived for another 3 or 4 months. So
was that the same doctor?
No, I went to a different doctor who diagnosed her.
Okay. Because it didn't sound the same.
I went to several different doctors with her. I put her on tour. That wasn't the first time I put her on tour. But so that was this example. And it was kind of interesting to me how it was said to me, your dog can live, but if you're not ready, and something you said to me at the beginning of the podcast, you were talking about how, helping people understand how to process this, helping people maybe emotionally connect with it, helping them not give up, maybe. I don't know.
I think it's so, you nailed it. I'm so glad you told that story because it's going to reach a lot of people. And I think that it's not our job or our role to tell someone what they should do. Mm-hmm. It's our role to educate. It's our role to empower them. Mm-hmm. It's our role to collaborate with them and coach. But it's not our role to tell you as a pet owner what you should or shouldn't do, and how you define quality of life is so different from someone else. You just mentioned that. And so those are the conversations that we should be having in that room with the client. Yeah. And it's such a powerful thing. And very often there's 3 to 6 options in any given circumstance. And that's our role. We should be talking about all of those different options and then having a conversation about how that feels and what that looks like and what's realistic and what's unrealistic in some cases. But to your point, how do we know if we don't try? Yeah. And we're obligated to offer the best medicine that we can. But again, without judging if someone is not in a position to do the extra things to keep them here. So, it's a fine line that we walk, but it's a very, very important one.
And I think sometimes veterans are concerned about, not blowing out someone's wallet. I've met a lot of veterinarians that are like the one time this was years earlier, she'd gotten this lump right here on her neck and it was growing and it had become quite large. And so I took her to the doctor. He goes, she's 14 years old. We can do the x-rays. We can do all the shit, but she's 14 years old. Come on, dude. Like, why make her suffer through all that? Call the ball. It's clearly probably cancer. Call it. I think she was maybe 13 or 12 at that time. And she lived to be almost 17. And so I was like just wrecked. And he was trying to save me money. He was trying to, make the dog not hurt. So I went to another doctor. That doctor told me the same thing. All old guys. So I'm an old guy, so I can throw shit. And then my friends told me about this Chinese doctor. This is in California. And this guy was from China. And he had the worst bed manner ever. He was cut and dry. He was sharp as sharp could be. You couldn't understand him half the time. He would take cash. And he would do this weird thing. He'd be like, bring your dog, make them walk around the room. And I'm like, what the fuck kind of thing is this? I've never, and you walk around the room. He goes, I think I know. And so he told me, he goes, I think she's going to be fine. He goes, just wait. Don't listen to those other 2 doctors. And I was like, on what basis of logic are you doing this? And he checked her out and stuff. And, and then, so I went to the other 2 doctors. And I go, hey man, this guy said this. And they're like, that guy's a quack. This guy, he had his license suspended at one point because he wasn't keeping good records. I mean, it was literally like going to a back alley doctor, but he had the most Yelp reviews, the most great things to say about him. And everyone said, don't just ignore the bed manner. And so after a while, I woke up on the day before Christmas and she was standing over me in the bed and she was bleeding out the side of the mouth. And this thing had gotten really big. It was coming, really uncomfortable. And she was bleeding out the side of the mouth. And I was like, okay, fuck this. Okay, this is what it is. We need to go do the job. So I took her to the Chinese doctor. He goes, nope, she's going to be fine. I was like, what? And he explained to me that she had something he was suspicious of where she got an infection or a growth in between the tissue. And then it wasn't responding to penicillin or any drugs because it was between the tissues. And I looked this up and I'm like, that's a fucking thing. And yeah, it wouldn't respond to any sort of medications, any penicillin. It wouldn't respond to anything. It was something between the tissues. And all it needed was to explode so that it could get air into it. And we could, clean it and heal it and stuff. And yeah, she was fine. They almost took, I think, 5 years off of the life of my dog with that.
Yeah, you just, you don't know unless you take a deeper look, period, And so it's one of the things that I always tell young veterinarians, don't look into their wallet. Don't try to figure out what they can afford and what they can't afford. Let them do that. But you have an obligation to say, hey, here are all the potential rule outs. One of those being an abscess, to your point. And then how do we address that? And so these are just powerful stories. You're an animal lover.
I'm an advocate, man. I learned the hard way. I've had 4 Huskies. You mentioned earlier, we were joking. I threw that joke in about Huskies. Huskies, there was a ton of people who bought Huskies during that Game of Thrones show because they liked the wolves in them. And they were flooding them back into the pet shelters because they're hard to handle.
You have to know what you're doing. And it's not just Huskies. Every movie that comes out with a certain breed, people are going to go get them without knowing and or understanding. I think right now one of the most populars are the French Bulldogs, and
oh really?
You better have another $15,000 to $20,000 because they're genetically, they have a lot of challenges, and so that's one of the conversations that I try to have with people is are you financially prepared to have this pet, and understanding what are the potential things that are going to be coming your way with certain purebred dogs. But behavior's a big one. Behaviors, when we talk about, relationship building, it's, how do you set people up for success when they first bring the puppy or kitten into the household or integrate it into the family, or let's say you want to add another pet to the family. There's a lot of things to think about when you're doing that. And so you have to be able to do that with empathy, but you also have to be able to have what I would say a transparent, honest, open relationship with those clients that are developed over time. And I always tell people, I always feel that your pets are part mine. And, after, taking care of them for 10, 15 plus years, when it comes to the time when you do have to say goodbye, and it's a privilege for me to be asked to be a part of that process. And it's, in my mind, that is the most important thing that we need to get right for our pet owners out there. And we need to make sure that we're communicating all the time about all the what ifs, but you also have to provide, to your point, options. I always encourage getting other opinions. Go out there, check out what I'm saying to you, and then come back to me and let's have another conversation. Or if I had to send them to a university, I would be their advocate. When they were talking to the veterinarians at a university level, because a lot of times that the conversations are, let's say, they're difficult, but also confusing sometimes because the language, the language that someone that is board certified, they haven't necessarily been in a practice setting. And so communicating with a pet owner is not always as simple as it should be or could be, I would say. So I would try to be an advocate for them in those situations as well. And so now I'm in this place of this online world that I'm not familiar with, and learning about digital marketing and digital space, and getting people to know, like, and trust me in a very different way that I'm accustomed to. For me, I love the one-on-one.
Yeah.
And now I'm doing the one-to-many. And it's been, I'm calling it identity flexibility right now, trying to stretch myself a little bit while hopefully making a difference. And you just told two stories that actually even compel me to keep going. And so I wanted to say thank you for that, because those are powerful. And I hear those stories, by the way, Chris, all the time.
Thank you.
And stories of the human animal bond. I've got clients that, their pets literally saved their lives.
Oh, mine saved mine, yeah.
And so it's one of those things that people don't understand the power.
Yeah.
The power in that connection that they offer us. And I want to make sure that we're sharing that, sharing those conversations and sharing those stories over time.
And to your point, the education and advocacy is so important. A lot of people, they'll spend all day looking on the internet for, I don't know, doom scrolling on TikTok or something. The world's going to hell. But, I've found some of the best data. You do have to go through a lot of it. You got to stay away from conspiracy nutball stuff. I've been treated by a lot of veterinarians that they're like, your raw diet, it's not going to work. You're going to blow out their liver. I mean, I've had friends that had dogs that they were liver failure, kidney failure, pituitary gland failure. They were just cooked. And I'm like, I don't know if this will work for you, but what do you have to lose? And they're like, the doctor says it's going to blow out their kidneys and their liver, and you're going to destroy them if we put them on a raw diet. I'm like, so what do you have to lose? They're telling you your dog's dead right now, and then you need to take it in. By a week, see what happens. As soon as I put Abby on a raw diet, she started eating again. She started running around. Sugar, cancer loves sugar. It hates fat. Yes, it does. And so if you cut the sugar out, then there's nothing it's harder to feed the cancer. And like I said, she lived, like, the doctors, every time we take her in to get checkup for 1.75 years, they would just be like, we don't understand what's going on with your dog. Like, how the hell?
Nutrition is one of the most powerful things that we as pet owners can do to help our pets live longer. And, we can't put them in a box, right? We can't put every pet has different requirements, different needs in terms of what they need and when they need it and how much they need. And that's something that is very difficult to sometimes convey when you're battling the internet, which we know is less than 20% accurate, most of the time. And so you're preaching to the choir right now. I'm a big nutrition advocate. And I think that there are two things that I would mention that I think will shorten or lengthen a pet's life, things that we can control. One is nutrition. And the other is nutrition / their weight. Obesity shortens their lives by up to 2 years. But the other is dental disease. And we can do something about that as pet owners. And that's one of the things that if you're, wanting to add extra years to their life, then pay attention to their nutritional needs and trust, find someone that you can have a trusted relationship with and have a conversation about your pet specific needs, whether it be nutrition, dental care, whether it's pain management, physical therapy, those kinds of things. Just, if they have a cruciate ligament tear, there's 3 to 6 different surgeries depending on And that's a conversation that needs to be had in that exam room. They need to understand these are your options. These 2 or 3 might be the best options, but they're not the only option for your pet. We see a lot of cruciate ligament tears, and so that's why I say that.
Yeah. Diet is so important. In the Facebook groups that I'm in for dogs and huskies, you'll see these people that'll be like, yeah, my dog is chewing his paws and chewing his elbows and scratching, and his skin's dry and he's really miserable and happy. I think he's dying. What's going on? And they're like, are you feeding him grocery store dog food? And they're like, yeah, we're feeding him pedigree and, or whatever, that cheap $3 bag of $3.50 bag of dog food that has Franken, God knows what's in it.
You know what? You're helping me. You're helping my cause. I appreciate that. I'm going to take this opportunity to say that, a lot of times people assume that it's the food that's causing the allergies. And the reality is, again, despite what the internet says, about 90% of the time, it's a condition called atopy, and atopy is environmental allergies. And when I read online about all these cases and people saying, oh, well, they're allergic to this, allergic to that. Well, those allergy tests that are very good, by the way, but they're not good for testing for food allergens. And so it's a conversation that you have to have with that pet owner that we need to look at the external allergies and how they're affecting your pet. And then how does nutrition play a role in that? Which it does, it absolutely does. But it's important to understand that the secondary bacterial infections, the secondary yeast infections, those all make your pet itch and lick their feet. And so there are things that we can do that are even at home that can help in very big ways to try to minimize the transition through that, what we call the skin barrier for those environmental allergies. And I live in the Southeast, so that was probably 85% of what I saw when I had my brick and mortar. Yeah.
Wow. And I referenced earlier the dogs that were at the wall. We put them on the raw diet and they came back. I never lost a dog off the raw diet. I've lost a dog because the person gives up and goes, I don't trust this. I'm going to just do the thing. And I have to be empathetic and go, okay, they're making that choice because it's too hard, but it doesn't have to be. Now I'm looking at your website. Let's talk about some of the things you got here on your offering. I see the tiers. There's, I think, silver paw, golden paw, and diamond paw. Tell us how these work and people can interact with them.
Thank you for asking. So we started out with something at a very basic level. We wanted it to be accessible to all. And so the first tier offer involves basically pre-recorded videos that I've done that take you all the way from before you ever get a pet, through midlife, through specific conditions, all the way to end of life and bereavement. We have a digital library full of ebooks, PDFs on top 10 this, top 15 this, questions you need to ask your veterinarian if you have this situation, those kinds of things. Then we have a paid monthly newsletter along with a free weekly newsletter that that we put out every Saturday. The second level takes that up. We have twice a month roundtable discussions where I'll pick a topic. Let's say, I think last time we did one on GDV, which is gastric dilatation and volvulus, or bloat, if you've ever heard of that, which is very life-threatening and an emergency. When they eat a meal, their stomach twists. It usually happens in barrel, deep-chested dogs, and usually older. And the air can't go up, it can't go down. They end up having to have surgery to repair it, and it is an emergency. And so certain breeds like Huskies can fall into that category, but German Shepherds, Boxers, those types of breeds, any dog can get it.
The garbage eaters.
We take right. We talk on
Yeah.
those topics for about 30 minutes, and then we open the floor up for live Q&A, and the owners can bring any questions that they want to the floor. They can bring their pet in. We can evaluate gait analysis. We can talk about their current situation. We can talk about how to plan for the future, things like that. So whatever's bothering them in that moment. And so we do that twice a month. And they also have access to me in terms of email. If they have let's say a non-emergent question, we will respond to that within 48 hours. And then the third layer, of course, is much more of me. So I'll take X-rays, or radiographs. I'll take their lab work, their lifestyle. We'll go through a full analysis and talk about, what do they need right now? And then again, how do we plan for the future? How do we preemptively slow down arthritis, depending on the breed that we're talking about? What I would say is taking a holistic approach, including nutrition, including enrichment, environmental enrichment, and then how do we build on that? So it's a much more almost concierge type coaching and advising that I do with the third layer. We're actually considering a fourth down the road that involves even more. But those are and then eventually what we want to do is have master classes. So where we focus on the top 10 or 15 disease processes. You mentioned cancer or neoplasia and how to address those things. And it's not about just extending quantity of life, to your point, but my whole saying is let's extend quality and quantity. Yeah. And we want to lengthen and strengthen the human animal bond. And so what are the ways that we can do that together? And it's just I don't know, it's very enriching. I learn something every day, Chris, every day.
The teacher is the best student.
Yes.
Usually you learn everything. Now I see on here you have you can download a dog pain checklist and tips to help your dog if they're in pain, they're suffering. I recently went and got a hernia surgery done in Las Vegas, and when I came back, the dog was jumping in and out of the back seat, and she started having a limp. I think she may have been scraping something when she was in the doggy daycare overnight while I was in hospital. And I had to look at it and try and determine, okay, is this something we need to see the vet? I did. And turns out it was just nothing. They gave her some pain pills and figured she twisted it jumping out of the car or something. But, knowing, what sort of pain they're in, and do I really need to see a vet about this? Or is this something that might be gone in a couple of days? And it was. It's just one of those things.
Yeah, it's with something like that, I think that using your intuition, your gut, and going, okay, well, let's rest it a couple of days, right? Yeah. And just like you or I, and well, if it doesn't go away, then hey, we know we probably ought to dig a little bit deeper. And you're very proactive with your pet care, and that's something that I very much promote with our pet owners. And it's if you think it's important, then go get it checked, right? Yeah. Don't wait. But one of the things that we try to do is teach people, okay, what can wait, what's maybe urgent but can wait, until tomorrow or the next day, or what is an emergency, so that you're left with a more confident feeling as opposed to the anxiety that's associated with owning a pet, especially a new pet owner, right?
Yeah, there's this. I wish more people would go to school for pets. I've always joked all my life that before people should be able to get married and have children, they should have to go to college for 2 years to, fix their psychology, any past traumas, learn how to be a decent human being to another person, and then learn how to raise children properly. But that's never going to happen because people just love winging it. It's the same thing with dogs and cats and animals. I made that mistake when I got my first husky. I was way in over my head, and I really just wished I could have sat down with myself and said, you should have researched what you were getting into and why this dog behaves the way it was. Because I couldn't figure out why it wasn't like other dogs that I'd had when I was a child. And huskies, they're their own freaking person. So
yes, they are. Yeah. Yes, they are. And that's actually one of the things that I love doing is coaching people on, okay, let's talk about your lifestyle. Let's talk about where you live. Let's talk about the space that you live in. Let's talk about the acreage or lack thereof that you have in the time that you have. If you're working a 10-hour day or you're traveling a lot, you really got to reconsider, should I get a dog or should I even get a cat? Even though they require less, they still, it's one of those things that I think, when I hate to say it, but you see these dog walkers in New York and they're walking 10 or 15 dogs. Who's the owner, right?
Yeah.
And why do we have them in our lives if we can't truly enjoy and embrace that relationship? And that's one of the things that I love talking about to people.
Or one of the things that I hate the most, the people that just throw the dog in the backyard and leave it there.
Yep.
And, the whole neighborhood can hear this poor dog barking. It's desperate for attention and love. And, Huskies are worse. They have to be involved in your life. They're very family oriented, but not any dog, you see the dogs that are chained to, some backyard hut and you're just like, oh my God. But yeah, I think education is very important. My last Husky that we lost last year, we had leukemia. So I had to circumvent learning what that was and how that was and what the deal was. And the raw diet for the very first time didn't help. She did enjoy it though. So she lived like a queen. So I said, fuck it. Let's just give her raw meat. And I mean, she's going to live like a princess for the next 8 months or 10 months she did. But there was a point where I had to start having hard conversations with the vets because I got about, I can't remember if it was 2,000, 2,500 or 3,000 in testing. And they wanted me to spend, I think, another big load of 3,000 or something like that. And so I had to start having hard conversations to drag the honesty out of them and go, what am I buying with this money? Am I buying time? Am I buying health? Or am I just spending $3,000 to find out what you pretty much suspect is leukemia right now? Because I'm pretty familiar with cancer and how it works. And, she'd had some cancer lumps that we had to have removed. But the leukemia thing, it doesn't really ball up anywhere, does it? Or does it? I don't know.
Generally no. But the end result is the same. And I tend to be, again, it's our job to educate, right? To say, hey, at best, we're going to add this much time. And you as the pet owner have to decide, is this quality? Are we keeping them alive for them? Are we keeping them alive for us? And to me, there's a big difference. And I, for me, if I know they're suffering and I know that I can't have a long-term effect on that, then for me, it's for my own pets, it's time to make that decision, because I would rather they leave at least with what I would call dignity
and feeling home
I don't want them to leave in an emergency situation. That's the worst case scenario when sometimes we wait too long and end up having to go into an emergency situation at an emergency hospital, and there they are in a cold room, having to say goodbye when maybe we could have done it in a much quieter, more peaceful way. So it goes both ways, Chris. It's an interesting dichotomy. Some people, like you said, just can't deal with it, and other people maybe wait too long, and that's part of our role is to try to help coach and direct, but never ever to be the one to tell you what you should or shouldn't do.
Yeah. It's a hard gamble too, but I'm glad that you guys are making this advocate system. Are these Facebook groups people are joining that are private Facebook groups, or is there some sort of social network that you have that people can interact with each other, or just with you?
There is on Facebook. We have a Facebook page. Again, it's Petlovers United. I think that's, we just renamed all this. So on Facebook, and then I have one that's Pet Care Education /questions. That that people can join or are asked to join. It's a more of a I'm still learning these terms, Chris, but I think it's a private Facebook page.
Yeah.
And eventually we want to have them in the community where they can, what we're trying to do is create a safe place where it's a non-judgmental environment where people can ask questions and share experiences just like you did, because people are going to learn from what other people have gained over time with knowledge.
We saved so many lives with that raw thing diet. So many lives I've saved with it. It's crazy. And then I've been yelled at by veterinarians that I'm killing animals and stuff. And that's one veterinarian told me that the problem with the raw diet is that there's raw meat in the house on the floor, and kids can get in and raw meat can spread. And then you got, I don't know what, botulism or something. I was like, what kind of people are you working with, man?
Yes, what he's talking about is salmonella, but
okay.
And I think that you, like everything else, you've got to do your due diligence. You've got to understand. You've got to make sure that you're doing your research, and as with anything, there's risks and benefits. If you're doing a surgery, there's the risk versus benefit. Very often, when we're doing an exploratory surgery, we would tell the owner, this is an exploratory surgery. We don't really know what we're going to find in there. And that's very, very important for the owner to understand before we go in there in a situation where we have no choice. So as long as people understand the significance and the importance of what and how we treat our pets, and that we're aware, just like, are you familiar with the term zoonotic disease?
No.
Zoonotic disease are diseases that can be transmitted from pets to humans.
Oh, wow.
A lot of people assume that because we live in the United States that transfer doesn't happen. Well, it does. And so, if you have children, there's a risk, right? And so there's hookworms. Children go blind every year. People, they have unnecessary surgery because they've gotten parasites from their pets, and that's a part of our role too, is to educate the client about here are the risks. And so I think that we as veterinarians need to do a better job at telling people what they need to know to be a good pet owner and to take care of themselves at the same time.
So as we go out, give people a final pitch out. Where can they find out more on the .coms, et cetera, et cetera?
Again, it's petlovers-united.com. And we have again, similar on Facebook. It's Petlovers-United. My name is Dr. Pam Johnson. You can find me on LinkedIn as well. And more to come. We're excited about this. We literally just relaunched as Pet Lovers United about a week and a half ago.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Pam, for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thanks for your stories, Chris. I really do appreciate it.
You got it. People should check it out. Petlovers-united.com. Thanks guys for tuning in. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss One, the TikTokity, and all those crazy places on the internet. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next time. And that should have us out, Pam. Great show.